Police in Hong Kong have fired tear gas and water cannon at protesters rallying against China's plans to impose a new security law on the territory. Thousands of demonstrators have been marching through the city center. Police say 120 have been arrested. Earlier, 200 senior politicians from around the world issued a joint statement criticizing China's plan. But China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi said the legislation should be brought in without the slightest delay. China is seeking to pass a law that would ban treason, secession, sedition and subversion in the territory. Activists fear it is an attempt to limit freedoms and silence Beijing's opponents. China's new law, why is Hong Kong so worried? All the context you need on Hong Kong's protests. How bad are China's economic woes? Hong Kong's leader Carrie Lam, who is seen as part of the pro-Beijing political establishment, has pledged full support for the proposed law and said the city's rights would remain unchanged. China has dismissed concerns the legislation would harm foreign investors in Hong Kong, an important financial center, and lashed out at meddling countries. How are the latest demonstrations unfolding? Protesters gathered in the busy Causeway Bay and Wan Chai districts of the city on Sunday, chanting slogans against the government and waving banners. Riot police fired tear gas and water cannon at demonstrators, who were wearing face masks to protect against the spread of coronavirus. The rally comes despite earlier warnings from authorities against unauthorized assembly and a ban on large public gatherings to enforce social distancing. Some protesters threw objects such as umbrellas and water bottles at officers, and used bins and other debris to set up roadblocks. Reports say Sunday's protest followed a similar pattern to many of last year's demonstrations, many of which turned violent. More than 8,400 people have been arrested in Hong Kong since pro-democracy protests erupted last year. China's proposal unites protesters old and new in anger. Danny Vincent, BBC News, Hong Kong. For many protesters, Sunday's protest was seen as a stress test. They wanted to see how the police would react to large-scale demonstrations following months of relative quiet. The young and old chanted familiar slogans from last year's movement. They called for the Hong Kong government to respond to the 5 political demands they set out last year. But there were new slogans, too. Some protesters called openly for Hong Kong independence. They claimed that it was now the only way forward for the semi-autonomous city. The police were quick to disperse the crowds. They fired several rounds of tear gas before charging towards the protesters. The national security proposal has united protesters willing to risk both breaking the law and social distancing measures in order to show their anger at plans that many fear could spell the end to one country, two systems. What is in China's proposed law? The draft decision, as it is known before approval by China's National People's Congress, includes an article that says Hong Kong must improve national security. It adds, when needed, relevant national security organs of the Central People's Government will set up agencies in Hong Kong to fulfill relevant duties to safeguard national security in accordance with the law. That means China could potentially have its own law enforcement agencies in Hong Kong, alongside the city's own. Hong Kong's Year in 7 Intense Emotions. China's Congress, Hong Kong, Virus and Money Woes. China scraps annual growth target for first time. How is Hong Kong run? Earlier this week, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo condemned the plans, which he described as a death knell for the city's freedoms. The UK, Australia and Canada have also expressed their deep concern. It describes Beijing's plans as a flagrant breach of the Sino-British Joint Declaration, under which Hong Kong returned to Chinese rule in 1997. If the international community cannot trust Beijing to keep its word when it comes to Hong Kong, people will be reluctant to take its word on other matters, the signatories wrote. They include 17 members of the U.S. Congress, and 44 UK MPs. The NPC is expected to vote on the draft law at the end of its annual session, on the 28th of May. It will then be forwarded to the NPC's Standing Committee, China's top legislature, which is expected to finalize and enact the law by the end of June.